Welcome. We are halfway through our study on the book of Revelation. Today we're going to read and discuss chapters 12, 13, and 14. Our perspective seems to have changed from looking down to looking up. We see more battles. We are also going to take a look at pre-Christian history as a source for John's motivation for recording his vision. Reading the book of Revelation is indeed a challenge. Sometimes it's very confusing, but don't be discouraged. Most of us are somewhat conditioned by our modern culture to think of this book as some kind of prediction of what is going to happen in the future. Revelation is a vision, not a forecast of future events. In his vision, John uses images drawn from earlier prophets found in our Old Testament, some that we may be familiar with and some not. Some of his symbols and images may be easy to interpret, and for some, we may never understand what they're intended to represent. Keep in mind that John lived in a time when Jews and Christians were being persecuted by the Roman Empire and expected to pay homage to the Roman and local gods. That was the perspective from which his visions were received. So hang in there. Right now, for this session, we begin with a prayer. O God, our Father, open our eyes and enlighten our minds as we study your word. So grant that our minds may know your truth and our hearts may feel your love, and then confirm and strengthen our wills that we may go out to live what we have learned. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. We're going to go back in history for a few moments to the time when Julius Caesar's assassination in 44 BCE. When his own senators stabbed him to death in the Senate chamber, it plunged Rome into a leadership crisis. As three rivals fought to replace him, leading citizens of Asia backed Mark Antony and Cleopatra. After Antony's fleet was destroyed by Octavian, he retreated to a fort where Cleopatra was hiding. Antony chose suicide rather than to allow Octavian to capture, torture, and kill him. Cleopatra poisoned herself rather than be brought back to Rome in chains. Octavian's victory caused an enormous crisis for Antony's allies, who now had to deal with their enemy as the ruler, one who had mercilessly killed those who opposed him in Rome. When the Roman Senate voted him the honorific title Augustus, Majestic One, the Asian leaders who had sworn loyalty to Mark Antony now demonstrated their loyalty by offering the new emperor unprecedented honors. Shortly after his victory, the Provincial Council of Asia humbly petitioned him for permission to honor him as the divine Augustus, along with the goddess Roma, and to build a magnificent temple in Pergamon, dedicated to the imperial family and to its gods, the first of its kind in Asia. During the decades of the 1st century CE, leading citizens of other Asian cities would devote huge amounts of city taxes to vie with one another for the honor and advantages of crowding their city with statues, arches, colossal statues dedicated to Rome, its rulers, and its gods. When John arrived in Ephesus, probably around 90 CE, apparently having spent some time traveling and preaching in Asia Minor, he might have seen a small army of expert stoneworkers constructing the colossal statues, each about 100 feet high, of Emperor Vespasian and his sons Titus and Domitian, and building the most spectacular temple in the entire city to honor as divine the very rulers who had devastated Jerusalem and destroyed the great temple of God. We can imagine John longing for vengeance, recalling the prophets, and more recently Jesus announcing that God would soon come to judge the world. Why would God allow these demonic forces and their arrogant human agents to overrun the world with apparent impunity? So perhaps what John did in the book of Revelations, among other things, was create an anti-Roman propaganda that drew its imagery from Israel's prophetic traditions, above all the writings of Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel. We have pointed out just a few of the similarities between John's writing and those of earlier prophets in this study. But everything we have said here about what John did is conjecture. Of course, we don't actually know where John came from. where he actually traveled in Asia Minor, or what else was inside his head when he wrote this book. We know only that he said he was on the island of Patmos when he saw a vision or visions. With that, we're going to go on to chapters 12 through 14. From chapter 4 onward, we have shared John's vantage point in heaven, from which he looks down to see judgment visited on earth. Beginning with chapter 12 comes a shift in perspective. Now John seems to be looking up at heaven, at the great dome of the sky functioning as a kind of projection screen, on which he sees a parade of what he calls semia, signs, omens, portent. People in the ancient world were in general far more attuned to the sky than we are. The sky was seen as an intelligible reality, to be scrutinized for the light it shed on human destiny, or even the affairs of the gods. We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him. You remember that one. In the Jewish apocalyptic tradition, it was believed that the end would be accompanied by terrifying events in the sky, eclipses, meteors, falling stars, and shaking of heaven. Such cosmic energy was employed not only by the prophets, for example, Joel 2:30 and 31, but by Jesus himself in Mark, Matthew, and John. If the beginning saw the creation of the sun, moon, and stars, then surely the end would be heralded by their wrenching transformation. After blowing the seventh trumpet in chapter 11, John sees another series of 7 visions introduced by the verb see, though they are not numbered explicitly in chapters 12, 13, and 14. Conflict introduced in chapter 11 between the 2 witnesses and the beast also integrates these 7 visions. Conflict between a pregnant woman and a dragon, between an archangel Michael and Satan, a sea beast and the saints, and an earth beast and the saints. Chapters 12 and 13 will concentrate images of evil rarely equaled in other literature. Virtually all the references to evil in Revelation point ahead or back to those 2 chapters. Chapter 14 presents a divine perspective on those conflicts through a throne scene, announcement of judgment, and then 2 scenes of judgment. So we go to chapter 12, the woman and the dragon. We begin with verses 1 through 6. A great portent appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and was crying out in birth pangs, in the agony of giving birth. Then another portent appeared in heaven, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 diadems on his heads. His tail swept down 1/3 of the stars of heaven and threw them down to earth. Then the dragon stood before the woman who was about to deliver a child, so that he might devour her child as soon as it was born. And she gave birth to a son, a male child, who is to rule all the nations with a scepter of iron. But her child was snatched away and taken to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, so that there she can be nourished for 1,260 days. A portent is a sign or warning that something, especially something momentous or calamitous, is likely to happen. The word order in the first verse emphasizes the portent that appears in heaven. It indicates that more is present here than appears. The pregnant woman is more than just a pregnant woman, the dragon more than a dragon, just as Judas's kiss signifies more than a kiss. Elsewhere in Revelation, portent refers to the counterfeit marvels that the beast and his companions perform. The woman is located in the center of the sun, moon, and the 12 stars, and she controls them and is revealed as a celestial goddess, although her sole purpose in Revelation seems to be to give birth and then flee to a divinely designated place. Birth pangs and birthings are images of transformation. The woman's antagonist is a great fiery red dragon, the most powerful opponent of God in Revelation, with origins in those chaotic forces that opposed God at creation. This dragon has 7 heads. Each head supports a diadem indicating royal power, just as the woman's crown of 12 stars symbolizes royal power. The dragon must be located below the stars in order to pull them down with his tail, which he does. The woman bears a male child identified as the royal Messiah by means of the image of the iron rod or scepter. The wilderness to which she fled is a place of famine, drought, demonic powers, dangerous animals, and similar to chaos prior to creation. But it is also a place of salvation, deliverance, and redemption. So we go on to verses 7 through 9. And war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. The dragon and his angels fought back, but they were defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. The great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. The pattern in verse 7 is similar to that in verse 3. Then another portent appeared in heaven, a great red dragon, and war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought. So we're talking about literary style again here. John was not just writing down what he saw, he was structuring his message as all writers must do. In this case, he uses a parallel structure or syntax in the first two paragraphs. He is structuring the appearance of the dragon the same way he structured the breakout of war. So we have conjunction of verb, a subject, and explanatory clauses. Then or and appeared is the verb versus broke out. Another portent in heaven, war in heaven, and a great red dragon versus angels. Michael and the dragon engage in battle, each with a troop of angels. Michael is victorious, and there is no longer a place in heaven for the dragon and his angels. But here he was also identified as the ancient serpent, Satan. So let's go on with verses 10 through 12. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven proclaiming, "Now have come the salvation and the power, and the kingdom of our God, and the authority of his Messiah. For the accuser of our brothers and sisters has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God. But they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony, for they did not cling to life even in the face of death. Rejoice then, you heavens, and those who dwell in them. But woe to the earth and the sea, for the devil has come down to you with great wrath, because he knows that his time is short." A loud voice then acclaims God and his Messiah. There were three reasons for the acclamation. First, the accuser of our brothers and sisters has been thrown down from heaven. Second, the comrades conquer Satan by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. And third, the comrades did not cling to life even in the face of death. The acclamation ends, like the battle, with the dragon Satan being tossed out of heaven to earth. Let's read verses 13 through 18 to the end of the chapter. So when the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman who had delivered the male child. But the woman was given the two wings of the great eagle, so that she could fly from the serpent into the wilderness to her place where she is nourished for a time and times and a half a time. Then from his mouth the serpent poured water like a river after the woman to sweep her away with the flood. But the earth came to the help of the woman. It opened its mouth and swallowed the river that the dragon had poured from its mouth. Then the dragon was angry with the woman and went off to wage war on the rest of her children, those who keep the commandments of God and hold the testimony of Jesus. Then the dragon took his stand on the sand of the seashore. The dragon chase continues. The woman flies by the wings of an eagle to her place in the desert, movement patterned after Israel's exodus to Mount Sinai in the desert or the wilderness. Exodus 19:4 reads, "You have seen what I did to the Egyptians and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself." She is nourished in the desert for 3.5 years. And at the end of the chapter, the dragon is left standing at the seashore, where help will come from the water. The two portents, the pregnant woman and the great red dragon, portray the birth of a boy, who in this case is the Messiah. Here in Revelation, we hear little about the life of the Messiah. He is born and immediately ascends into heaven. The mother also disappears into the wilderness. We now have the religious situation in this series of visions, conflict between the testimony of Jesus and the dragon, or Satan, who was thrown down to earth from heaven. These sketches disclose superhuman dimensions of the Christian conflict with society, as John envisions it, the evil that the Christians face and how that evil insinuates itself into society and culture, and how Christians are to conquer it. Chapter 13 consists of two visions, one of a sea beast and the other of an earth beast. So we begin chapter 13, verses 1 through 4. And I saw a beast rising out of the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads, and on its horns were 10 diadems, and on its heads were blasphemous names. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard, its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. And the dragon gave it his power and his throne and great authority. One of its heads seemed to have received a death blow, but its fatal wound had been healed. In amazement, the whole earth followed the beast. They worshipped the dragon, for he had given his authority to the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast, and who can fight against it?" These first 4 verses parody the enthronement of the Lamb. As the dragon stands on the shore, the great beast is seen rising from the sea, in contrast to the dragon who was cast down. The sea is an image of the abyss of chaos over which God had to be victorious in order to create an ordered world. Those powers of chaos continue to threaten divine creation until the monsters of chaos are overcome in the last days. For John, the 3 animals listed here are associated with dangerous and monstrous. The dragon transfers his royal power to the sea beast so that he can make war on the rest of the woman's children. The transfer of power, throne, authority from the dragon to the sea beast parallels the parodies of the transfer of those qualities from God to Christ. One of the beast's heads appears to have received a death blow, like the lamb, to continue the parody. The sea beast's recovery causes people to worship both the dragon and the beast rather than God. We move on to verse 5. The beast was given a mouth speaking arrogant and blasphemous words, and it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to speak blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven. Also, it was allowed to wage war on the saints and to conquer them. It was given authority over every tribe and people and language and nation, and all the inhabitants of the earth will worship it. Everyone whose name has not been written from the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb that was slaughtered. We again hear of the 42 months, or 3.5 years. These verses tell us what was given by God to the sea beast to do. He is allowed to blaspheme God, God's name, and those who live in heaven. The sea beast is also allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them, similar to a story in Daniel 7:21. So let's read verses 9 and 10. Let anyone who has an ear listen. If you are to be taken captive, into captivity you go. If you kill with a sword you must be killed. Here is a call for the endurance and faith of the saints. We remember a similar directive to listen, which ends each of the 7 prophetic pronouncements to the 7 churches in chapters 2 and 3. In some translations, the second proverb is parallel to the first. If anyone is to be killed by a sword, he is killed by a sword. The final statement calls the saints to endurance and faith. The gist of the admonition seems to be to endure in faith rather than fight with a sword. So let's go on with verses 11 through 18 and the second beast. Then I saw another beast that rose out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb, and it spoke like a dragon. It exercises all the authority of the first beast on its behalf, and it makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose fatal wound had been healed. It performs great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth and in the sight of all. And by the signs that it is allowed to perform on behalf of the beast, it deceives the inhabitants of the earth, telling them to make an image for the beast, that had been wounded by the sword and yet lived. And it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast could even speak and cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. Also, it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be given a brand on the right hand or on the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell who does not have the brand, that is, the name of the beast or the number of it for its name. This calls for wisdom. Let anyone with understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number for a person. Its number is 666. Then I saw marks a new vision that calls attention to a second beast that rises from the earth. In the Jewish and Near Eastern lore, there were two primordial beasts, one associated with the water and one with the earth. Job 40, for example, describes the beast of the earth. Look at Behemoth, which I made just as I made you. It eats grass like an ox. Its strength is in its loins, and its power in the muscles of its belly. It makes its tail stiff like a cedar. The sinews of its thighs are knit together. Its bones are tubes of bronze, its limbs like bars of iron. Similarly, Job 41 gives us the beast of the sea. Can you draw out Leviathan with a fishhook, or press down its tongue with a cord? Can you put a rope on its nose, or pierce its jaw with a hook? Will it make many supplications to you? Will it speak soft words to you? Will it make a covenant with you? Will it be taken as your servant forever? Will you play with it with a bird, or put a leash for young women? Will traders bargain over it? Will they divide it up among the merchants? Can you fill its skin with harpoons, or its head with fishing spears? Lay hands on it. Think of the battle. You will not do it again. According to Enoch, the earth beast holds its chest in an invisible desert east of the Garden of Eden. Behemoth will reveal itself from its place, and both Behemoth and Leviathan will be nourishment for those in the opulent days of the Messiah. Both primordial beasts have their place in the last days. The earth beast deceives by performing great signs, even making fire come down from heaven. In verse 15, giving breath to the image of the beast is another parody, this time of the giving breath to the two witnesses. After the living image killed those who would not worship it, the remainder, all social classes, are tattooed or branded on either side, either their right hand or on their forehead. The Greek word is cheragama, which means an imprint such as a serpent's mark, a brand on a camel, or an impress on a coin. It could be a tattoo. It is the counterpart to the seal of God. Here the tattoo could have been either the name of the sea beast or the number equivalent to the name. Since each Greek letter also represents a number, 666 was the sum of the numeric equivalents of the letters in a name. John did not have available Arabic numerals. The name Jesus, for example, would have the sum 888. Nero has been suggested as a possible name with the equivalent number of 666, but it's unknown what name John actually had in mind. In chapter 13, John is described by mythic images of creation, the character and activity of evil that Christians faced. Each of those beasts has its own history, but the Lord God overcame both of them in order to establish an ordered, stable world. The Exodus from Egypt and the Babylonian exile each provide a face for Israel's beast opponents. The beast will not be overcome completely until the last days, when they will be eaten at a banquet in the opulent days of the Messiah. For the most part, parody and mythic imagery of creation are the sources for describing these two beasts. Yet all of John's visions describe hidden mythic dimensions of conflict in social life, especially Asian life, as he envisions it. We go now to chapter 14. This chapter consists of 3 visions and 7 scenes. A throne scene followed by 3 angels announcing some sort of judgment, a blessing, and 2 scenes describing judgment. The throne scene reveals the powers that truly control the world, in contrast to the beasts who claim power in chapter 13. So chapter 14, verses 1 through 5. Then I looked, and there was the Lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him were 144,000 who had his name and his Father's name written on their foreheads. And I heard a voice from heaven like the sound of many waters, and like the sound of loud thunder. The voice I heard was like the sound of harpists playing on their harps. And they sing a new song before the throne, and before the four living creatures, and before the elders. No one could learn that song except the 144,000 who have been redeemed from the earth. It is these who have not defiled themselves with women, for they are virgins. These follow the Lamb wherever he goes. They have been redeemed from humankind as first fruits for God and the Lamb. And in their mouth no lie was found. They are blameless. This is the only place where Mount Zion appears in the book of Revelation. It was the place to which Israel returns after the exile in Isaiah 24 and 40 and the second chapter of Joel. Of course, the temple in Jerusalem was built on Mount Zion. We are told the 144,000 have the name of the Lamb and his Father's name written on their foreheads. The voice from heaven that John hears is not identified specifically. The singers are most likely the 144,000, but we're not told that. They could be the harpists or the heavenly angels. We are also told that the 144,000 are virgins, not soiled by association with women. This would seem to imply that all 144,000 are men. So let's go on to verse 6 through 8. Then I saw another angel flying in mid-heaven with an eternal gospel to proclaim to those who live on earth, to every nation and tribe and language and people. He said in a loud voice, "Fear God and give him glory, for the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea and the springs of water." Then another angel, a second, following, saying, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the great. She has made all the nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her prostitution." Then John sees another angel flying in mid-heaven who proclaims an eternal gospel to those on earth. That would not include those 144,000 who had been redeemed from earth. Those people should give God proper respect and awe and give him glory. The hour of divine judgment provides the motive for giving God glory. They should be worshiping God, the Creator, rather than the beast. Another angel abruptly introduces Babylon, which may refer to the Mesopotamian city or quite possibly to Rome. As an image, Babylon stands for more than a reference to the city of Babylon or of Rome. As a contrast to Zion, Babylon is an antonym to all that they represent. Babylon will fall, for she has caused all nations to drink from the wine of passion of her lust or prostitution. Let's go on to verses 9 through 11. Then another angel, a third, followed them, crying with a loud voice, "Those who worship the beast and its image and receive the brand on their forehead or on their hands, they will also drink the wine of God's wrath, poured unmixed into the cup of his anger, and they will be tormented with fire and sulfur in the presence of the holy angels, and in the presence of the Lamb. And smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever. There is no rest or day or night for those who worship the beast and its image, for anyone who receives the brand of its name." So a third angel then explains that those who worship the beast and receive its mark will drink the wine of God's wrath. Moreover, this punishment will be full strength. Think of the punishment of Sodom and Gomorrah in Genesis. The smoke in verse 11 can be either an image of God's positive presence or a result of his fire of his judgment. Let's go on to verse 12 and 13. Here is a call for the endurance of the saints, those who keep the commandments of God and hold fast in the faith of Jesus. And I heard a voice from heaven saying, "Write this. Blessed are the dead who from now on die in the Lord. Yes, says the Spirit, they will rest from their labors, for their deeds follow them." Someone, it's not clear who, repeats part of the formula of chapter 13, verse 10. adding a further definition of saints as those who keep the commandments of God and hold fast to the faith of Jesus. We now read verses 14 through 20, the end of the chapter. Then I looked, and there was a white cloud, and seated on the cloud was one like the Son of Man, with a golden crown on his head, and a sharp sickle in his hand. Another angel came out of the temple, calling with a loud voice to the one who sat on the cloud, "Use your sickle and reap, for the hour to reap has come, because the harvest of the earth is fully ripe." So the one who sat on the cloud swung his sickle over the earth, and the earth was reaped. Then another angel came out of the temple in heaven, and he too had a sharp sickle. And another angel came out from the altar, and the angel who had authority over fire, and he called out with a loud voice to him who had this sharp sickle, "Use your sharp sickle and gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, for its grapes are ripe." So the angel swung his sickle over the earth and gathered the vintage of the earth. And he threw it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. And the winepress was trodden outside the city, and blood flowed from the winepress, as high as a horse's bridle, for a distance of about 1,600 stadia. By means of cloud locomotion, one like a human, a divine being, but not Jesus, appears in royal insignia, carrying a sharp sickle, an image of judgment, to reap the ripe earth in judgment. This image occurs 7 times in this chapter. Here, the blood of the grape represents judgment and death. At various points, this series of visions directs Christians on how to respond to the religious situation, that is, their situation from John's prophetic visionary point of view that uncovers what is most fundamental for them to know. They will be victorious by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They will succeed by not clinging to life even in the face of death. They are urged to keep God's commandments and hold the testimony of Jesus. They will be victorious by steadfast endurance, not by using the sword. This is essentially the same message given to the 7 churches in the chapters 2 and 3. The final vision underscores the religious situation at the time of judgment. Through images of sickle and harvesting, the ripe earth is reaped, and the grapes are gathered and pressed. In session 6, we will see visions of the 7 last plagues, and we will see Babylon, the whore, riding the beast. If you want to participate in the Zoom discussion and are not yet on the list, please send an email to online.classes@northgateumc.org, and I'll send you the Zoom link. In the meantime, have a good week.